Hey, everybody. Can we get the panel members to come on out? You guys are walking too slow this morning, all right? All right, we're going to get started here this morning. Good morning, everybody. So far, so good. Anybody been out to see the Canon booth out front yet? Raise your hand, okay? One or two. The rest of you, you have to go see the Canon booth, please. We're here, this second panel in the morning. We're talking about improving government cybersecurity, return on investment, and we are very, look at this, I got a pedestal. Let me put that there, okay? We are very fortunate to have three distinguished government network defenders with us, okay? On the far, your left over there, Pat Arvidson, the Special Assistant to the Office of the National Manager for the National Security Systems, wow, at NSA. Welcome, Pat. Everybody give him a hand, please.
Thank you. Thank you.
In the middle, we have Matt Scholl, the Chief of the Computer Security Division and Information Technology Laboratory at NIST. Everybody give him a hand. All right, and closest to me, we have Colonel Caswell, the permanent professor and the head of the Department of Computer and Cyber Sciences at the United States Air Force Academy. So give them a hand, guys.
I think it's important that since we've introduced everybody and thanked them for coming, that we got to thank Matt for bringing his backpack.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. We tried to get him to give the backpack in the green room, but he didn't trust anybody the appropriate amount.
How many of you would leave your laptop somewhere and then go get a cup of coffee? Yeah, thank you. Not happening.
I thought you said you knew I had sugar problems, so you wanted to bring me a juice box.
I actually have a juice box
Thank
and
you,
a bag of
appreciate it,
Chewies.
yeah.
He promised to share his jukebox with the rest of us, all right? So, all right, so let's get right to it. Dave, I'm going to start with you on the first question, all right? So I want to challenge, you guys stop playing over there, okay? I've already lost control of the panel.
Did you ever really have it?
No, I never had it, yeah. We knew going in, okay? So I'd like to challenge the notion of the idea of the panel, right? That there's some sort of return on investment. So I agree that the dollars that any network defender spends, we have to watch that and be very careful about that. But I disagree that the money we spend on security is going to reduce some sort of cost. So the question I'm having to you, Dave, is should we instead be talking about reducing risk and not worrying about reducing cost?
So I think there's a balance of both sides on it, right? When we're talking about risk, we often forget about what we've already invested. And so we think about it, we're going to go buy a new box, buy a new system, buy a new capability, and that's going to improve our return on investment. Realistically, I think our discussion needs to be shifted, much like your premise states, to focus on risk. And I give a couple examples on that. Training, I look at it as a phenomenal one. Total cost of ownership is something we often forget about on the DoD and the government side.
It's not just you, everybody forgets about training part, but go ahead.
And as stated this morning, that makes me sad. So when we're talking about a device or a capability, often we forget about simple things like configuration. So if I'm actually looking at a risk perspective on it, and I know we're going to talk about DODCAR, and give a plug for that.
Really, will that be on your mind, Pat?
Yes, it might, just a little bit.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so as we start talking about DODCAR, right, when we're looking at do we need to buy a new widget, I think the first question should be, do we have the widget that we can then tailor and use? And so that looks at, are we configuring the widget to a capability in order to provide the best security coverage? Are we looking at providing a training for a capability that provides an opportunity for folks to fully leverage what we've already invested in? And then frankly, do we have a homogeneous system? And so in the federal space, I think one of our biggest challenges is that we look at this as commodity buys. We're going to buy a device or a capability or a platform or whatever at every given instance. Well, that's an untenable situation when we're talking about a transitory workforce. So when we have our operators and they're moving between different organizations and they don't have the ability to maintain proficiency on a device, or they're just getting to a proficient level when we move them to a next area and they have a new device or new system that they have to go now learn on, well, the overall risk that we're incurring is significant.
So you're saying, though, because we have so many tools, the risk is...
Oh, it's significantly higher.
Yeah.
We have, I think on the Air Force network, something like 180 at one point in time an account of tools. We trying to understand those devices, and these are very complex systems, is unsupportable. And so, particularly when the workforce changes out every 2 to 5 years, trying to get anyone proficient at that level, and then they're going to go to another assignment. And those assignments often will have a different set of tools. It's very hard to maintain it. So we're not looking at it with respect to total cost of ownership. We're looking at it of, I'm going to go buy this requirement, this capability.
So the risk equation is not even part of that, is what you're saying?
Unfortunately, in the current state, I don't think it is. Not by ill intentions, though. The intent is to go and mitigate the risk. The problem is our acquisition process, as well as frankly, the training and development process, because we're not doing homogeneous network, because we're not looking at total cost of ownership, our risk, we are accepting more risk with the intent of, I'm going to buy a new capability, and that therefore it'll reduce the risk. And so we're not looking at it as a whole system of equation. And that's where I'm hoping some of the stuff that Matt's working on, or Pat's working on with DODCAR, will really help try to improve some of our discussion so we can have a holistic perspective of what is the risk we're accepting now and what are the actions, and those actions can be a new resource buy and reducing costs that way, or it could be we're going to homogenize the network, or we're going to have a focused investment on training of airmen or personnel who are operating these devices.
Are you guys buying this? All right.
What was the question again?
No. You want me to say something absolutely ludicrous and you can disagree with it? Or do you want to go first and I'll say,
Why would
and I'll
we stop
disagree with
now?
you? Okay,
Go
go
ahead.
awesome. So I think I actually want to challenge this entire notion, right? And there's a nuance to this. And the notion that I'm challenging is the fact that we're even addressing risk. We're not, folks. We're not even addressing risk, right? We say we're addressing risk, right? But pick your framework, risk mitigation framework, MIRA, anything else like that. The very first thing it says is know your threat. Know your threat. So I'm supposed to pull security control out to do double authentication based upon my threat. Or what's my threat? I don't know. I don't know what my threat is, right? I can tell you what information, I'm going to get spear phished. You're all going to get spear phishing. Does that mean I put in two-factor authentication? I don't know, right? And so what's gone on in the department? The department said, well, RMF's broken. No, the RMF's not broken, right? It's a process. It has input, process, output. What's broken is the input piece, right? So we've done this thing called DODCAR. It used to be called NASCAR, NSCSAR, right? DODCAR is DODCAR. The lawyers told me to quit saying NASCAR. So they came back and told me a couple weeks later.
NASCAR was a great name. Okay.
NASCAR was an awesome name. Pete Dinsmore over from supporting DHS with .govcar actually was the guy who came up with that. He's out there. But yeah, so what is DODCAR real quick? And so we can get into it and I can tell Godzilla later.
Thank you.
All right, perfect. Okay, so what DODCAR is I usually tell a story to go along with it, but I'm going to shorten it because we don't have that much time. DODCAR is a framework that basically breaks it down into 4 different levels. The first 2 levels, Jim Richburg over at D&I has done a fantastic job with the cyber threat intelligence framework. The top layer is basically, think of it as a strategic objective. What is the adversary trying to do, right? And that is, I usually think of it real simple as get in, stay in, and act, right? The adversary is trying to get in, they're trying to stay in, they're trying to act. Underneath that is the operational objective. So what are they trying to do at the operational level? They're trying to establish presence. They're trying to move laterally. They're trying to do this, right? And it falls into the other category. NSA then built more underneath that with the DoD CIO and the Joint Staff and DISA that said, here are all the different ways you can do that, right? You can attack the hypervisor. You can write to disk. You can do a DLL injection. So we did that, right? And that became our framework. So that's the NSA Technical Cyber Threat Framework. It's on our website. It's free to download. And what we started to do after that is we went through our incident data. So for us, we went through our classified data, and we sit there and said, how did this bad guy, what did he try to do in this instance? And we made a check mark. And we did it again on the next report, and did a check mark, and we did a check mark. And we went through an entire nation-state profile and came up with what? The adversary's most likely. The darker red it was most likely what they're going to do. Hey, that's pretty cool, right? And the next thing we did is we took the framework again and said, let's take a look at our capabilities in our framework, right? Our capabilities in our network, and how does our capabilities protect, detect, and respond? So you should hear the cybersecurity framework out of Matt's group, right? And say, how does it protect, detect, respond against every single one of those blocks? Not the colors, but just the blocks, right? So how good does this capability protect against write to disk? How well does it detect against write to disk? How does it do respond? And we did some objective, subjective scoring, a bunch of folks in a room, right? We came up with some stuff. It's not perfect, but we came through it. And then what we did is we took it and we took one side and put it over the top of the other side and said, you know what? The Department of Defense has been investing heavily to stop spear phishing. It hasn't done anything about writing to disk. It hasn't done anything about protecting the hypervisor. So we've decided to assume risk and how the adversary is actually trying to do something, and decided to mitigate risk and how they're going to do it.
So Matt, go right to the bottom line though, right? What do you show the leader when you get through all this done so he can make a risk decision?
Yeah, so we showed the leader actually, basically, here's the threat and how you mitigated the threat. And where you didn't mitigate the threat, you can assume the risk and put your people there, right? You can put your monitoring systems there. You can put your CPTs there. You can put your incident response teams there.
You were talking to breakfast a chart that we could give to a non-technical leader. Okay?
Correct.
Talk about that, because that's pretty interesting.
So the way this chart breaks out, right, with this basically this heat map and this capability map, it's very simple to walk into a room and go, this is where people are attacking you. It's red if they're bad, light pink if it's still attacking you, white if they're not. And this is how you're defending it. Green, yellow, or red, right? Think about the consequences of that discussion, right? So I'm kind of a little bit off my game here, but if you think about it is, if I walk into a room and say, hey, I want to connect my corporate network to your corporate network. Okay, here, I can give you 800 pages of documentation about how we did cross-domain solutions and RMFs and all this other kind of stuff, right? Or I can walk in a room and go, this is the threat data from my network, this is how I stopped it, and this is how I mitigate, and this is how I assume risk. That's a very simple, powerful conversation, right? So in the department, the first time they came out with this, right, I was down in the Pentagon working. I got a phone call from the DoD CIO. He said, Pat, we got to go see the DepSecDef. So I said, okay, sir. So we walked in the DepSecDef's office. He pulled out a slide, and he said, sir, we're about to spend $300 million on a capability that's only going to provide 2% increase on our overall security. Or we can go to Windows 10 at $27 million and get a 67% better security. Secretary said, you got 1 year, go, right? That's what Mr. Joyce was talking about earlier today, right? That's how that decision was made, a very simple red, yellow, green framework laid up against a red, yellow, green framework that drove a business decision, right? That had data behind it. Pete did a fantastic job when he did the first one. They came out and said, there's 87 ways that you can improve the network, 107 of ways you can take stuff out because you've over-invested, right? That Dave was part of that group too. That's a very powerful thing, right? So does it provide a return on investment? It provides bang for the buck, right? I know where I'm not over.
There's a risk equation. So the guy can say, if I did these things, I can reduce my risk by X amount of percent.
Yeah, I hate to use the term risk. I like to say it's threat-based cybersecurity because you're putting threat at the very beginning, right? You're actually putting threat in the process. Where our other stuff that we've had before has said, know your threat. I don't know my threat, right?
Let me throw this to Matt, because this is something that Dave said, all right? That, since the intrusion kill chain paper from the Lockheed Martin team came out back around 2010, there's been an explosion of tools that we could put at every phase of the intrusion kill chain. The government, the commercial sector, we've spent billions of dollars buying these things, deploying them, and all that. But it seems like we can't consume one more device.
Yeah, so I might not answer that question, but I'll answer your first one. Maybe I'll answer them both.
Or just do something you want. You can make it up.
Yeah, and you know what? Maybe I'll just talk what I want to talk about. So but back to this ROI thing, like all other ROI risk investments, be it insurance or healthcare or life insurance, there is a history of an actuarial statistic data set that provides an informed base for what the offset of the costs of those risk mitigations are. Mm-hmm. We don't necessarily have that in cybersecurity. So instead, risk investment decisions are done either about emotion, which we often talk about, right. Significantly less information than is needed for the amount that's been spent, or it's done against what we can secure, which doesn't necessarily map to what we should secure. So having some informed system that provides not necessarily that type of statistically significant actuarial data, but informative decision process to ensure that the investment is being done right and at the right place is something that needs to be predicated prior to doing any of these tool decisions. And then once you have those, one of the wonderful things that the S in NIST stands for is the standard space.
Yep.
Is to looking at those tool sets to ensure that they both interoperate and work according to what your ROI decision is. Will it operate for what the risk issue is that I want to intend? And there's, the nice thing about standards is there's so many to choose from, which is an awful standards joke. But so ensure that the standards suite that you are going to use is something that is capable within the tool suite that you are having. It also helps with your transition issue here. So if someone's flipping to a new job and everything is based on, SCAP or OVAL or, DODCAR or whatever it is, or OpenC2 or whatever it is the open or the integrated standard suite of information is that your tool is going to use, hopefully that'll help you.
Well, Mike, the purpose of the question, though, is I would like to propose that the more tools you have, all right, the more risk you're going to automatically assume, because your InfoSec staff doesn't have the capability to manage it all. Just because your chart says we should have a capability.
Well, I think that's universal. That's not just tools. That's also the diversity of your endpoints, the type of your mobile infrastructure, what type of network appliances you have. Everybody wants something different or want what they're used to. But there's this balance between security through diversity and being able to manage your infrastructures.
Yeah. I mean, there's significant risk if you can't manage the tool. You were mentioning it
That's
before,
exactly.
right? You have a Ferrari of a security tool, but only turn on 2% of it.
Right.
Yes.
Or you have a Ferrari, but you're driving on a dirt road.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
I'm not sure what that analogy means.
Works for me.
Okay.
Does it involve a juice
for me.
box? Okay. So, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, when we're talking about, your Ferrari example, right, that you're driving on the dirt road or what have you, the challenge with, even when we're trying to do the objective measurement on that, is some of the measurement principles aren't allowing us to see what level we're configuring it, right? There's an assumption in many of these kind of objective measurements that says, well, I'm going to have, we're at Palo Alto, right? A layer 7 firewall rule, and it's going to be, a layer 7 device, and it's going to be fully configured to that layer 7 one. I think one of the inherent challenges and dangers we have is we assume that that's the case.
Right.
And so, very much one of the kind of charges I'd give to industry is help us see how, to the limits of what the capabilities could provide, so that we can quickly assess, are we at that stage? And so now we have an objective standards that can feed into kind of a larger hierarchy, so we can have an informed risk or threat analysis.
So that's the perfect point. Within DODCAR, we assume, right, that the device is configured correctly, that it's implemented correctly, and that's operated correctly, right? Some of the things that we've seen when we've gone to talk to folks and then gone back and test them later on is what I like to call environmental drift, which is how did you architect your network, the security tools that you bought, and then how did you implement them? And a lot of times, those are totally different people.
Correct.
Right? And so the implementation runs into operational necessity. So for example, they've run a wire from one room to another room that actually is not appearing anywhere on the thing, but it's the only way they could get the system to work. So there's a burgeoning environment where people are coming along with what I would call virtual red teams that look at that environmental drift to see, have I put the things in the place that I need them to be in place, right? And we're working with them to incorporate the DODCAR framework to push out some of that kind of stuff. They're already working with the MITRE attack framework, so that's perfect. But you're absolutely correct, right? There is an assumption there that the tools are going into place are going to be operated correctly, they're going to be configured correctly, and when those things don't happen, we automatically assume it's a problem with the tool and we should go buy a new tool.
Well, and the other disconnect is oftentimes, if we're making a return or an investment decision, so I have an acquisition arm that buys a capability under one premise and one assumption that it's going to fill this void in the DODCAR framework, the communication of that to the operators who are now installing and maintaining and making sure that it's actually being leveraged for that purpose doesn't necessarily happen. And so we're then buying capability and equipment and installing it, not really understanding the why that it was purchased on the first half. And that creates a disconnect. And so while we're saying, yes, we're green on our charts, we might not actually be because we're using it for some secondary purpose that was already covered.
And that was a small but important point that Pat made, which was the drift doesn't occur not just in the tool set, but it also happens in the operational environment as well, either through procurement and installation of shadow IT, or just people just trying to get their jobs done. And so sometimes these end up on divergent paths.
So that's a good point. So you mentioned before, Dave, that in big government systems, there's probably 150 security tools deployed. In the commercial space, that's true also, right? Even in small organizations, there's 15 to 20, right? Medium-sized companies have about 60. So here's the question to you, this group. Is there any effort underway in the government to try to get a handle on that growth or to consolidate on a set of tools that is integrated and orchestrated so we don't have to put that burden on the management team?
Yeah, so just from a DoD perspective, just to give you an idea, it's roughly 2,300, right, on the NIPRNet side alone, right? Which is unique because 98% of the traffic on NIPRNet is YouTube videos, as my boss likes to say. Everybody's watching cat videos, right?
Those are important, though.
Yeah,
They're important.
exactly, right? So,
Highly secure cat videos.
right. So DODCAR, the group that I chaired, of course, it's tri-chaired, so I answered to the DoD CIO and NSA and DISA command, has said, hey, we want to retake a look at the endpoint, right? So they gave us a crash. They gave us 6 weeks to redesign the endpoint and get it down to some things. And so we did our analysis, we did our things, we came out with our top 10 recommendations of capabilities that need to be there. And then we hand that over to DISA, and DISA then takes a look at those capabilities, and they develop a couple of cocktails out of it. So the last time we did this, they developed 3 COAs out of it, and basically said, using 3 basic products, right, a maintenance service, Windows 10 Secure OS baseline, and an EDR type of service, right, we could get off of HBSS, right? So that was 3 commercial products that could do everything that you needed to do, collapsing all those myriad of other things that you had to have. Now, you may want some of those other things for business processes, right? You may want them for different reasons, but from a security standpoint, you could get down to there. And that has become a huge driver now within the department, this DODCAR process to look at where are the, I wouldn't necessarily the efficiencies, but where are the redundancies that are not serving a useful purpose that we could look at recapitalizing in different ways.
Matt, you said something during the prep for all this, that there's not a government effort to get this done, but there are pockets of effort to consolidate.
Yeah, so, you know, in the federal civilian agencies, it's difficult, if not legislatively impossible, to have like a government consolidated effort. Each agency is different. Each agency has its own oversight and requirements. Each agency has its own budget authorities. And agencies are not allowed to supplement the budget of another agency, so to speak. That being said, both GSA and DHS both collaborate and work on things like consolidated procurements, standardized tool assessments. DHS has been working for a long time on the CDM program, looking at that for federal civilian agencies, not just in tools, but in services as well that support the tool platforms. So there are efforts going around to try to simplify, and a lot of it is also, it's not just agency by agency or within the agencies, but getting the cross view across government is extraordinarily difficult when the diversity of tool sets and then alerts and reporting comes up at, you know.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that sounds like a sliver of hope there. I mean, for a bunch of guys that are pretty worried about what's going to happen in the future, that sounds like it's positive.
It is positive. And again, in the civilian agencies, it's a little bit different because their mission is not security. They have a separate business model. At NIST, our mission is metrology and calibration for the nation. Security then becomes an ancillary expense for that. So how does that expense support the mission space? So you're looking at tools that then are both supportive of or potentially dual purpose for the mission space. So they're a lot more frugal. They're trying to leverage what other people know and use, and you know, dollars are tight.
So you know, on the
okay,
point of
Pat?
being, yeah, on the point of being, I'm trying to get the right words
Yeah,
right.
I hear
On
you.
the point of being maybe slightly controversial in this space,
What?
right?
What? I'm
yeah.
shocked, I say.
So here's the real rub, right? And this is, I think we're getting to a really good space now. The rub is we got to stop talking about tools and start talking about capabilities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What capabilities do you need in your network to defend your stuff? And this is the controversial statement, right? If I took any one of anybody's tool and I took it into the lab and said, how well does it do this? It's going to be within 80% of the other tool, right? And it's based upon that tool this year, right? Subaru had a great car 2 years ago. Doesn't mean they have a good car this year. Doesn't mean they're going to have a good car next year, right? They may have the best car the year after that. It doesn't matter, right? If I take I just pick on, we're here at Palo Alto since you sponsored me, so let me just bite the hand that's feeding me, right? If I take Traps into the lab and go, hey, Traps is really good, that doesn't mean Traps is going to be the best next year. That doesn't mean it's going to be the best next year, right? But the capability it provides, right, is something I need in my network. So when we start having that conversation, this goes back to what Matt's talking about in the standard space. But when I go back to having that conversation about, hey, as an agency, what capabilities do you think I should have, other agency? That's a really good conversation to have, right? Here's my threat. Here's the capabilities I have against it. Okay, great. What'd you buy? I bought this. Yeah, my guys want to buy that because they're used to training with it. Okay, good, right? Let's stop having the glossy trifold argument, right? Let's start having the argument of what capability do I need, who provides it the best for the folks that I have working operationally, right, to support my mission, instead of trying to shove things down people's throats and make them adopt things that they don't understand.
So I want to be careful on that, right? When we talk about capabilities, often that goes into the acquisition path, and that I want a specific capability. Unfortunately, well, actually, fortunately, it's a capability across multiple platforms. So I might not have a single device that provides this, but a combination of device A and device B together will provide that capability. And I think our acquisition process currently doesn't really like that kind of discussion.
Oh, no, it doesn't. It hates
I need
it.
to have one thing, and it does this widget, does this capability, and therefore there's no way I can do as an amalgamation. Kind of towards your question, one of the things I'm really excited about we're trying to do at the Air Force Academy is we're trying to work through how do we prove some of these, simpler, lighter, more effective kind of networks, even inside of the federal government space, which is a challenging thing. There's a lot of policies we're asking for waivers and otherwise, based off of a risk discussion, informed risk acceptance. Using simple things like cloud-based, services, truly as a service, platforms, which. For many in this room, right, Office 365 is actually a useful thing in a cloud-based environment. And when I talk to a lot of industry partners, they're all aghast of why do you do these things in serial when everyone can just go onto a document and work at the same time. Turns out for an academic setting, that's actually really useful as well. Yeah. And so using kind of some of these centers for opportunities for examining what is a capability-based approach using a set of systems for trying to identify what's a holistic security platform that provides those controls. And Pat, I'd like to chat with you afterwards. I'm betting we came to pretty close to the same kind of realization on the HBSS and some of those kind of constructs. How do we prove it? Because in many ways, I think the challenge is we have to show that it works. Because I think there's a disconnect between the acquisition arm understanding what these platforms can do versus what we've bought them for. And then how do we use those platforms to their fullest extent in an integrated manner so that we can get the best bang for the buck, the best return on investment of this system.
So let me address that, right? Because I think it's important to have that conversation right now, right?
As opposed to after.
As opposed to afterwards, because this is important, right? So within the DOD-CAR process, right? So like I said, we just did the endpoint. We built a map of how the adversary is going to attack us. We looked at the capabilities that we needed to do to prevent that. We turned it over to DISA, to their endpoint team, right? They selected the products that provide those capabilities. Then how did they test them? They went back to the heat map, right? They went back to say, this was my requirement document, right? This is how I tested it, right? If I take the same heat map and I go, okay, let me test HBSS against it, yeah, we got some serious gaps here, right? That's the other half of this, right? Not having a threat-based piece at the beginning of it means your test and acceptance plans aren't testing what's going on in your network, right? You're testing about what you believe is the problem, right? And you might be right. Generally, you're only about 30% of the time right.
It might even be worse than that. It's a classic conformance failure where you have no requirement to base an assessment off of.
Yeah.
Therefore, you're subject to what either people tell you, or you just go with your install base, which drives probably most of the decisions.
Yeah.
Well, and that also kind of addresses some of the concern when we talked about, towards your first question, risk. The idea that we accept the risk that we have now at whatever level it is versus, doing a configuration or buying a new system or looking at a different, when I say system, a set of tools perhaps, that might offset that risk as a whole. When we talk about cloud, I think this is a ripe area where we often will not accept risk of moving into a cloud service because we have some lack of trust of this unknown world. When reality, in most cases, or in many cases, the cloud service vendor, even under a non-FedRAMP level 5 area, is still more secure than what we're operating in our current instance.
Yeah, but the ability to have that conversation is lacking.
It is exactly lacking, yes.
So let's talk about that. Let's switch to the cloud because I think it's pretty clear to the whole audience here that everybody is going to be in the cloud. Even government's going to be in the cloud. Let's say 10 years. You're going to have the
cloud.
Yay, cloud first. You're going to have the bulk of your infrastructure in the cloud. But the problems that we're all thinking about is it's multi-cloud service providers, Google and Amazon and Microsoft. You're going to have a hybrid approach because not everything's going to be up there right away. All right, and so Matt, their question to you is, how are you thinking about how do we secure our environments now, but think about it in the long term. What's it going to look like in 10 years?
Okay, so 10 years, it's 2019, is that the year, 2018?
2018 is
Yeah,
today?
2018.
Yeah, 2018.
2018 today, unless you're talking fiscal year.
Yeah, fiscal year 20, so if you think.
Can I just tell the story? Matt was going to go to the Ignite Federal Conference next year at the Reagan Building for 2019. So
Who knew they had the 2019 website up already? So I'm Googling last night, like, where the heck am I going tomorrow? I'm going to the Reagan
it
building.
made us all stop and figure out where we're going.
Right,
Okay. Anyway, go ahead, sir.
What was I saying?
Cloud,
Cloud,
2019.
10 years. 10 years.
10 years.
Yeah, so
Call it 2020. Call it 2030.
Who
just
can
make it
remember
easy.
10 years ago? What did IT look like 10 years ago? Right? And
Can I
you want me to
have a
say what it's going to be
386?
like 10 years in the future?
Just what are you thinking about? That's what I want to
So
know.
what am I thinking about 10 years from now? Cloud will not be cloud 10 years from now. If we look at trends, data trends over time, at NIST when we're doing our R&D work in security, we're looking at things like, so first of all, everything is converged onto, everyone's got a phone in their hands right now, and you're probably twittering or posting or doing, so right. All our interface to the internet and to the cloud has converged onto that device. There is a slow but steady migration away from that device as our main interface. Some people call this the Internet of Things, wearables, distributed networks, but it's going to be, we all got one of these now, and then we've got maybe a set of glasses, and our car is connected, and my backpack is connected, and we play a game at NIST, find the thing that's not connected, because that's actually hard to do now. So there's a divergence away from a single interface platform, so it's going to be much more things than people. The volume of data being generated by what we call the cloud now has to move much, much closer to the endpoints in order to handle this, mostly because our pipes can't handle it. So we've got to get to 5G or next generation in order to really leverage this going forward. And then there's this concepts coming out of fog and mist. You look at things like Amazon Snowball, pushing cloud and resources to the edge. We'll probably see more evolution of peer-to-peer in order to handle this. And also we are not ready for, but within 10 years, we're going to start looking at dual world quantum environments. So I personally think the next 10 years are going to be extraordinarily different and revolutionary from what we have now. That's a long story for, if we're not in the cloud now, we probably are and just don't even know it for most of the government.
So do you disagree, though, that we're going to have lots of workloads in the cloud from government spaces in the next 5 to 10 years?
We're going to have lots of workloads that are not local.
Yeah.
Whether or not they're in the cloud or not, I don't know. That might be in someone else's edge that's got downtime that you lease. There might be a lot of workload as a service where I promise not to use the word blockchain. I promise.
Yeah, good. It's
Okay.
bad.
Where there might be some kind of peer-to-peer monetary capability where I will lease out workload as needed type of thing. So who knows what's going to happen? But again, I'm not sure cloud as we know it now will be cloud 10 years from now.
Well, that's fair enough, and it's great being a predictor of future 10 years down the road. 'Cause
I
you
often
make
am
up anything.
incorrect.
Yeah.
Yeah, we bet on WiMAX. That didn't happen. Yeah.
So let's bring it closer in, okay? Let's assume we're going to be out there in 2 or 3 years. We're actually going to do moving workloads from behind the perimeter out.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that was your actual question.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's focus on the asset.
Okay.
All right, if we're not going to own the asset because we're going to externalize it into a cloud vendor, then let's focus on the data. If we are pushing out data, secure that data wherever it goes. If we're pushing out workload, secure that workload wherever it goes. And you can do that now.
Sure.
You can secure, constrain, and enforce policy on both data and workload in an external cloud, whatever that policy is. Isolation, geographic, by policy, by requirement. These capabilities exist now. So it's okay if you dump the server, then focus on the data.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I run another group, and a gentleman briefed this, and I really like the way he said it. I think it's really important that people start to understand as we move to IoT, cloud, whatever it is, and some people call it protecting the data versus the network, whatever it is. But I like this one because I think it'll resonate with all of you and you can understand it. You have to decide what is a pet and what is a cattle, right?
Say that
On the
again?
Network.
A what and a what?
A pet and a cattle.
Okay.
I'm
Right?
ready for this
I
one.
can't wait to see
Yeah,
where
I
this
know,
goes.
right.
So here you go. Ready? A pet is something that you love, and when it gets sick, you take it to the vet, and you nurse it, and you give it medicine, and you take care of it, and you invest family and love and hope into it,
And you don't eat it.
and you get it better. And cattle, when it gets sick, you put a bullet in its head and make a hamburger, right? The reason I'm saying that is...
I don't know where this is going, but I
Yeah,
love the
I'm-
analogy.
Right?
Okay.
And the reason I'm saying is that this is where we're going, right? Disposable IT, zero trust, right?
Yeah.
My laptop gets burned, throw it away, right? I want a virtual instantiation that when I pop it up, I know it's me. I don't care if I still have a sticker on the cover or not, right? I don't care if it's blue and it lights up. All I care about is it works when I sit down. And that's what we're going to, right? Now, we come attached to our phones, but you buy another phone, you log in, and it downloads all your data. You're good to go, right? You got your Chromebook, you got your MacBook, you got whatever it is. That's where we're going. We need to get there from an IT infrastructure in our business space. Understand what is your pet, which should be your data. That's where your business resides, right? That's where your IP resides. And what is a cattle, right? And figure out what you can just, when it gets sick, you throw it out and start over.
And so, to jump on this, so a lot of the exercises that are done now in security are we are securing what we can rather than what's important.
Yes, absolutely.
And we should, those things that are not necessarily important, those low impact systems, even some moderate impact systems, push them to an external cloud. Stop.
If I can, I want to push back even a little bit more on that. This goes into the as a service, right? When we're talking about cloud, in many ways, the as a service construct, the higher we go on the stack there, I think we are offsetting the security risk to some of these kind of commercial vendors as well, and that's okay, right? When Walmart and Google's and all these major companies who have significant investment, NASDAQ, for example, kind of important to us, is already investing into the cloud environment, we shouldn't be afraid to go into that space.
Right.
And the more we can move our pets, if you will, I'm not sure how to make the analogy, turn the cat into a dog or something, it's still a pet, but you move that into an as-a-service platform, as opposed to retaining and maintaining and developing our own kind of one-off version of a specialized software and server and all this other stuff. I think that improves our security posture because we're now pushing our pets so that the management of the, whatever business process that's working off of that, that is the pet analogy, is now into this as-a-service platform, and we still maintain the data. I think that's really where, if I'm looking into the future, that my tenure not as grandiose as the quantum aspects, but from the speed of the federal government, the more we can move into these as-a-service kind of platforms where the data is being managed, we own the data, but the system that's executing on that data is now an as-a-service kind of provider. The safer we're going to be in a security aspect, the less maintenance we have on it.
We constantly treat the network as the thing to be coveted and protected.
Right.
Right? And it's interesting. We started a network vulnerability strategic portfolio review from the SecDef or DepSecDef last year, and one of the questions he said was, "I spend so much money to protect NIPRNet. Why do I protect NIPRNet?" And the response back to him was, "Well, it's because we fight the war from
We have
NIPRNet.
cat
We
videos.
do transcom stuff from NIPRNet, right?" And he said, "Why don't I just take it off NIPRNet? Wouldn't it be cheaper just to take it off NIPRNet?" And everybody went, yeah, I guess. But we haven't done it that way for 10 years, right? What we've been doing is saying, I have a network, I have a mission, throw the mission on the network. I got to land within my business area. Oh, hey, let's just go ahead and throw payroll on that. Let's go ahead and throw HR data on that. Let's just go ahead and throw this on it, right? And we got all this convergence of data. This is awesome. It's like, was that network designed to actually secure that data, to support that mission, right?
Well,
We just
let's
do
bring it
for
all the way
convenience.
around because what you said, Matt, you're right that it's no longer one set of place where the data is. It's no longer just behind the perimeter. I think of them as data islands. We have behind the perimeter, we have mobile devices, we have data center, we have cloud, both SaaS and IaaS. Those are all different data items where your data resides. and back to the very first question is, we have too many tools to manage, right? But the cloud providers we are buying are saying, buy our security tools in our cloud environment, thus increasing the number of tools that you have to have. So that just puts a bigger burden on your teams to manage those. So what is the strategy there? How do you handle all that stuff?
Well, I think within DodCar,
Other than cows and pets.
cows and pets, right?
Yeah.
So I think within DodCar, it's an actually interesting thing that's come around, and it's made me very fond of Matt and his organization, which is amazing that I'm
you
actually
said that in
fond of
public.
Matt. Yeah,
Yeah, right.
I said that in public.
And that does not
right?
necessarily make me happy.
Yeah, so DodCar work, understanding what the framework is and what the framework isn't. The framework was really built upon an endpoint architecture, so it was very heavily influenced on this endpoint type of thing, and very heavily influenced on protect the network. As we started looking at cloud, and we're talking to the big 4 cloud vendors, right? As we started looking at cloud, and we started looking at the framework and said, you know what? When we scored NIPRNet, we actually said, how does a firewall do protect, detect, respond against all these kind of things? Firewall doesn't exist within the cloud. The functions of a firewall exist within the cloud, but the firewall does not in of itself, right? So no,
That's not true. There absolutely is virtual firewalls in the cloud. All the firewall vendors have them.
Okay, yeah, all the firewall vendors have them, but the cloud providers will tell you
They have one too.
I provide
Yeah.
capabilities that do the same thing. There's a difference, right?
That's a difference.
There's not a piece of hardware sitting there.
Correct.
Right, it's a software-defined thing, right? Okay, so awesome. So as we started working through this, we started realizing that, oh, wait a minute. If we actually went back to the security controls that we've kind of gotten away from, right, and looked at the security controls related to the functions, and looked how it's instantiated in the cloud, all of this starts to make sense, right? It provides us some basic understanding that we've kind of lost with cloud, right? I'll be honest with you. We all kind of look at cloud and say, oh, it's a SharePoint side in the closet over there, but it's not, right? But that's how everybody treats it. I got a folder, I'm good, right? No, not. So understanding that and how actually the security controls that Matt's team has worked very diligently over the years to build 1,000 of them. Thank you. Going for 2?
More common.
All right, perfect, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but looking at that has all of a sudden made things a little clearer. It's a long road. I'll be honest with you, it's a long road for us, right? It's going to take a lot of extra work and some heavy lifting, but as my boss said, it's only work, right? You just got to do it.
Yeah. And so this also comes back to what we were saying also about figuring out the tool bases. Look at them from a control and or outcome, viewpoint, rather than a specific, this is what my tool does viewpoint.
I agree with that, yeah. The clock is winding down, all right? So we're going to wrap this up. Pat, I'm going to start with you, all right? Any takeaways you want to give the crowd before we walk off the stage? Any last-minute things? And we'll come to all.
Yeah, so again, I'm an evangelist very much for these frameworks, right? Whether you use the MITRE ATT&CK framework, you use the Lockheed Martin ATT&CK framework, whether you use DodCar framework, you use DNI's CTI. The frameworks are exceptionally important because, I'm going to shorten this real quick.
Yeah.
Imagine a building, first floor. There you go.
Okay,
First floor, architects, engineers, system admins, incident response, business folks, customers on top, right? I sit there and I yell Godzilla. It's outside the window. They all rush to the window. Your sysadmins look out the window and they see feet and they go, I can't get stepped on. Your sysadmins look out the window and say, I see knees. I can't get kicked in the head. Your incident responders see claws. They go, this is bad. Your business folks say, I see shoulders. These are really sexy. Let's talk more about it. Your customers see eyeballs and teeth and go, oh my God, this is terrible. Then when I ask you, do you understand threat? You all shake your head up and down. But not a single one of you understands threat heuristically or holistically together, right? You need a framework to bring that building together to have a conversation. Good. Did it in a minute.
Wow.
So Matt, with Godzilla and cows and dogs. Top that.
That might have been the 4th time I've heard you say that story, and never that fast. So I think a lot of what we're saying, thank you, sir, today is make good informed risk decisions, informed. Part of that is understanding your business asset as well as what threat is trying to act upon that asset, and then what capabilities that you need in order to protect that asset. Don't secure what you can, because you can secure it. Secure what's important and secure it in an informed manner.
Excellent. Dave, you got the last word.
So in addition to everything colleagues set up here, also make sure that risk-informed decision is looking at the holistic system. It's not just the technology that is plugged into the box or into the wall. It's the configuration of that, the training that's able to operate it, and all of those other controls that are there to realize the potential of the systems that are being purchased and acquired.
Excellent. It's been an excellent conversation. For all of you, Matt will be sharing his juice box out in the break room when we do that. Can you give everybody a hand for doing this? Good job, guys.